Hey, thank you everybody for taking your time, for this beautiful webinar. I know it's a beautiful day in Ontario, at least in Ottawa. We have a lot of snow here. So, Rick, why don't you just introduce yourself, and your class, and then I'll take it from there.
Okay, we're a paralegal class. They're about. I'm the instructor. My name is Rick Nobrega. We're a paralegal class at Cestar College. We're about 3/4 of the course, and we're doing legal billing now.
Amazing. Okay, so let me put everybody on mute, and I'll start from there. Hey, thank you, Cestar College students. Appreciate the time you guys are taking today. Feel free to stop me. I'll be focusing on the chat channel all the time. So if I have any questions, we'll keep this as a very, interactive session. And this is a CPD.
New visitor.
This is a CPD that I have developed, for the Law Society of Ontario. It's a 1.5-hour CPD, but I will condense it to an hour. We'll give you a view of two concepts here. There's practice management and legal accounting, and we'll talk about tomorrow when you guys will become, legal professionals, what is expected from you by the Law Society, and, how regulators will come and audit you and your practice, and what you need to be preparing, okay? So this presentation, I call it Everything Practice Management. And as you see here, there are professional obligations that you need to have as part of your practice. We will talk about, client intake, service, communication. There's file management. So that is like every time a client comes to you, how do you manage the file? What happens in that scenario? And then we'll talk about financial management. How, what are some of the ethics? What are some of the guidelines? How you need to do that? The second aspect of financial management is business management. Like, you can't be just good in your legal profession. You also need to be good in your business, because at the end of the day, you're running a business. The Law Society also cares about professional management, because, at the end of the day, they want you to be, managing your profession well. And we'll talk about time management, which is a very important aspect for legal practitioners, because at the end of the day, there's very, very less time in your pockets to play with. And we'll also talk about personal management of getting a work-life balance, right? Like how do you achieve that when you will be a legal professional, okay? So let's now delve into deeper questions around professional obligation. So when a client comes to you, the first step that you're doing is client intake. And modern day client intake is far different from the olden day client intakes. Now, olden day client intake is like a good handshake in your legal office, and then you would discuss and do things. In modern day, a lot of people, because of lack of time, actually prefer these things over virtual. Law Society has a lot of regulations on how you actually do things virtually, right? So client intake process is a process where the first thing, it all starts with you making the call or they making the call and the consultation. There's a lot of details on what Law Society lays out as information that you need to collect, and there's like mandatory number of information that you need to collect, and we'll get into those details later in the presentation. But at the end of the day, after you've collected that, you need to do a conflict check. After you do a conflict check, you kind of come to an agreement on what kind of a retainer that you will exchange. And then you will ask the client to actually deposit a retainer into your trust account, right? Because you want to start work, but you don't want to really start work till they really kind of pay you that extra money, right? So you want to make sure that they kind of pay you the retainer, and after that, you want to start, right? Now, practice management softwares make this life very easy, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. But sometimes what can happen is you will find that after all these things, they may want to non-engage. And when they non-engage, you have an obligation to send them a very clear letter saying that you're actually non-engaging with them. So that way, things are very clean between you and them, okay? So let me now, probably it's that time of the thing before, you kind of get into the details. Let me introduce you to the software as well, and then we'll go hand in hand. A client intake process clearly has a retainer letter, and the retainer letter has to have all these details. You need to have nature and scope of the matter. What are the client responsibilities? You need to be extremely clear on that. You need to schedule like a representation of what you're doing. You need to be very clear on that. Then the method and the frequency of the communication. Like, are you going to use email? Are you going to call them? Are you going to use text? You need to be very clear to them how you're going to do that. Then you need to be very clear on the retainer arrangements, right? And then we need to also talk about termination details, because what if this thing does not go well? How are you going to end this, right? And finally, you need to address client confidentiality, and then the risk associated with the method of communication. The Law Society is extremely, meticulous on this thing, where you kind of tell them, like, hey, if you're using email, there's like confidentiality issues. This is what it is, right? Like, so you need to kind of state those things. Okay. Now, next, before we get on to file management, let's look at client intake as an example. Okay. So what I did here is, I have my screen here where we'll go through a classic client intake process. Okay. A client intake process is when a client comes to you, what do you kind of, do to that? Now, softwares like us do so many ways of client intake, right? You could do a portal. A portal is, let's say, the info of that email of that person, like, let's say his name is davidfred@hotmail.com, right? And, in this case, let me put a sample key, and you can get a portal, right? Now, what's a portal? Portal is you can send this QR code to your client and ask him to fill in all the details. The reason why I'm going to show that is because we make a lot of things mandatory. So let me show you what is mandatory. As you see here, first name, last name is mandatory. You have to know your client's stuff. His address is very mandatory, right? Like, you want to know that. And you want to definitely get multiple phone contact addresses. You want to get an email address. And then you want to know a few things. Like, you want to know what the matter is about. Then the type of photo ID that he's going to provide you, like, is it a driver's license, and you also want to know how he heard about you, because it's always good to know those things, right? And Law Society asks you to capture all these things, right? So this is like a standard thing that you can do as part of your intake process. For this demonstration, I will use a much more simpler example. Let's say we get David Fred as a new client. How do we intake him? You can add him as a new client. Obviously, David. And let's say Freddie is his name. You can take more information, birth date, and all that stuff. Let's say, his profession is he works as a contractor, contractor. And let's say his address is 71 King Street. I'm going to use Ottawa because we are from Ottawa. And let's say that's his home address. And, and then you can say, hey, that's my mailing address. If he has a work address, it'll always be good to do. So you can add another work address, let's say 82 Queen Street, right? Again, I'll go with Ottawa, Ontario work. And as you see, softwares like ours are so smart. They start filling in details for you, right? Like, and you can say that's the mailing. If you choose this, the mailing, that will become, the other way. And then his phone number, let's say 613. Right, I'm just making some random number here, and let's make a fake email for him. So df@hotmail.com. Okay, and that's his personal home phone address. Now you can hit the save button. Now this is where the Law Society starts mandating a few things on you very, very, very quickly. Right, the first thing that you will see is you can actually look at this contact to see how good this contact is. So we provide you with what we call a score of a contact. So you can just press this button here. It'll say, hey, you did not collect a cell phone number. Does he have a fax number? You didn't get company details. You're missing a few things, right? So you can go back and edit and say, oh, this guy is a Mr. His company is, he works at DF Contractors, right? See, the Law Society expects you to collect all these information, and we give you a mechanism by which, you can collect these details, okay? So again, you can go back. I didn't fill everything, but you will see that your scoring will slowly go up and up and up as you're filling all this information for David Freddy. Now, why is the Law Society asking you to collect all these information? The reason why they're asking you to collect all these information is because it's good for you in the future, right? Like you need to contact him or you need to contact his spouse or this or that. Like you have all these details. Having a very high level of information on David is very important because you need to maintain that contact till you actually close this matter, right? Like, so that's why it's very key. Now, the next thing that you will basically focus on, right, is what we call conflict check. Like you'll do a simple conflict check. And let me just do a very, very, very quick conflict check. And you will see what we do is there are several things that you can look for David and Freddie, right? Like, hey, have you actually represented him in the past, or has he been represented by somebody as an opponent, or like, was he part of some other matter that you've done in the past? So what conflict check does is it takes the information that you have given here, puts it together into a search inside the database. We call it like business intelligence search, where we kind of combine all the information that you already know about Freddie, and we kind of pull it together into a report for you. And why that report is important, and let me pull that report in a second here. As you see here, it tells you a lot of information here. Hey, so many Davids, right? Like, so it's telling you like, hey, these are guys who looks like David, right? Sometimes that could be like, this David could actually be a last name, like David's son. And it's also highlighting, hey, so many David's sons, right? It also gets you people who sound similar, like David, Davis, very close. Spelling mistakes, it catches all that and says, hey, so many people who are very close to this guy's name. Do you see a conflict? And you look and say, you know what? I don't see that. Now, it would even go further. If you had seen David Freddie in a matter, it would tell you like, hey, in this matter, I saw him as a respondent, or in a small claims court, he was like, something like, it'll highlight all that stuff. Once you've kind of done that, right, you're pretty good. Now you can actually go ahead and create a matter for him. Click on a matter, and I'm going to go for a small claims matter, right? So let's say it's a small claim, but you could have other ones. Like, for example, this could be a POA speeding matter or a bankruptcy matter. So let's use small claim. Let's say this is David versus Adam, right? And they basically have some, issue with the neighbor on property lines or something like that. Like it's a very small claims matter, and you can hit the same button. Now, this is where that next level of what I showed you in the slide comes into place, right? Like you can now create a retainer letter. Let me create a retainer letter. So I'm going to click on document generation, and you can use retainer letter, and you can use Adobe, PDF, or Microsoft Word, whatever you prefer. And let's say you are requesting, $1,200, right, as a retainer letter. Sometimes it might be a flat rate. It might be a simple one. So you have so many choices. You could, the client could be in French, right? Because, if you're living close to Ottawa, right, like, you need to serve both English and French clients. So you can just download a retainer. Now, the retainer has to have a few clauses. As you see here, like the company logo, and your banner is there, so that the guy kind of gets like an information of what he does, description of services, fees has to be very, very clearly established. How are you charging him? If you're going to use like other people's like assistants, you need to say, hey, what's going to be their charge rate? Then even disbursements, like, let's say you're going to get into other, expenses, you need to say, hey, how are you going to do that? Interest, like, hey, if the guy's late, how are you going to charge that? What's the retainer amount? Termination of legal services, extremely important, right? Like, and communication. This is something that the Law Society puts a lot of emphasis on, like, hey, that you want to say yes, right? Like, so this is something that where you have signed as Roger Moore, we use a fake account here, and also this. Now, if you have payment, we also introduce a payment link, right? You can just click on this, and it'll allow, and then it'll directly take you to a payment page where you can actually enter the payment, right? Like, so we allow that as well. So a lot of stuff that we enable here is all there in the software, and you can actually go through that process, right? So what we saw so far is how you do an intake, what kind of services you can do, what kind of communications you may need to maintain, and how a retainer letter is going to be there. If you have any questions, post it on the chat channel, and I will be more than happy to answer them. If not, I'll keep continuing, okay? What's file management? File management is a very interesting aspect, right? Like, the Law Society wants you to make sure that you create very unique file number per person. The reason why they ask you to do that is when they come for an audit, they want you to do a cross-indexing and quickly tell them what the file is, right? Like, and softwares generally do that very well. Like, I would not want you guys to start a firm where you do all these things manually yourself. It makes no sense. They want you to understand if the files are chronologically placed, right? They want you to make sure that, personal recordings and client interactions are all part of it. Let me show you a software like ours, how that will be done. For example, file number, we automatically create that for you. And it immediately tells you when it was done, right? There is an area of practice, right? And there's a description, right? And then if you have more documents, you can place them here, right? Like in your document management system, right? You can open and keep it. Sometimes you can even exchange this whole thing using DocuSign, right? Like, we work with DocuSign so that, like, if you need a signature, you can send that across, right? So all that stuff is all enabled here as part of the file management stuff. Like, file number, then chronologically ordering them. Like, for example, if I would go into my quick view, I can quickly click on this button and it will sort me on all my files all the way from, from the time I worked on this, right? Like, as you see, this is a demo account. We've had it for so many years, right? Like, right from 2014, I have all my files which are active, closed, archived, everything. Because the auditor is in front of you, right? You don't want to be searching and saying, oh, give me a minute, I'm going to open this file, show you where my records are, right? Like, so they're looking for very quick methodologies and evaluating how your performance is going to be, okay? Let's now move on to financial management. This is where it gets interesting because what Law Society is looking for is phenomenal trackability with respect to your finances, right? Like, they want to make sure that you are having billable times, timesheets, client file, a proper accounting system, right? You're invoicing your clients properly. You're handling overpayments, like, if any, right? And they're also making sure that, hey, if the money comes before you raise an invoice, it's going into the trust account and it's not going into a general account. How are you handling disbursements, right? They're also making sure that, like, you have your bank statements, you're managing even small details like canceled checks, duplicate deposit slips, right? Like, everything with respect to your financial management is what they're actually wanting to see in an audit and making sure that you're actually doing this. Now, even if you would ignore Law Society for a second, right? You want to do this very, very well, right? Like, the reason why you want to do this well is because only if you do this well, you're running a good business, right? Like, having good, healthy finance means your business is actually running well. So even though the Law Society lays out these obligations, it's important that you internally practice them naturally by yourself, okay? Now, financial management also means, like, you have proper ledgering, journals, disbursement journals, and monthly reconciliations. It's a very key concept, right? Like, on 25th of every month, they want you to make sure that you reconcile the previous month, right? Like, and bank statements generally come on the 1st to 10th of the month. So you have 15 days to kind of reconcile your trust and your general and make sure that you're doing all your reconciliations. And we'll go through these in details, okay? Before we go into business management, I want to show you a few things, how softwares can make it very simple for you. So if you go to the matter, right, and if you go into an event, right, let's say you're accepting a small retainer. Let's say, you're saying, hey, I want 500, actually we said 1,200, right? So we say $1,200. Let's say the guy sent you an email transfer, right? And you need to put the reference number here, right? What it is. And you need to say, hey, I'm depositing it into my pool trust account. And you can say, hey, I received it from David, Freddie. And you can say, hey, I want to send him a receipt, right, like for this. And you want to hit the apply button. All you've done now is you got the money into your trust account, right? Let me download a quick receipt. Now, receipt also has a lot of important details. So let's walk through that, right? The Law Society wants to clearly say, like, hey, I've not accepted cash above $7,500. You want to say that it was paid. You want to put your signature. You want to put their signature, right? Like, and do all those details, right? That's exactly what needs to be there in a retainer receipt. Now, once you have received a retainer, this is where you start your financial processing. Let's say this is a very simple matter. You need to pay an application fee. You went to a court and you did a few things and you want to do a simple invoice, and then you want to pay yourself. Like at the end of the day, you want to make money. So let's do a few things. Like, for example, let's say there was a disbursement to pay an application fee, right? And software like ours are very smart. You just start typing and it knows what you are doing, right? Like application fee, you can say application fees are generally about $100. Immediately it calculates tax. It says, hey, you're in Ontario, it's 13%, right? Like, now if it's tax exempt, you can click here. Application fee is generally tax exempt, so you can override it. And you can now say how you paid for it. You say, hey, you know what? I paid this on behalf of my client, and I use my business credit card for that, right? Like, because now, as you can see here, we are not only managing your trust accounts, we also manage your general accounts, right? And you can say save, right? So right now what happened is we collected information about the application fee. That means the client now owes you that money, right? Because you paid for it. And we also recorded that general accounts, like, hey, it was actually, spent from my general account, right? Let's go to dockets. Dockets are super simple, right? Like you can just say, initial client meeting, met the guy for half an hour, the software automatically converts it to 30 minutes, and you can put description. You can say, met with the client, discussed the small claims issue, and need to start working, right, or something like that. Now, softwares like ours, provide phenomenal ability to record. You can actually speak. Like, this whole thing I could have just spoken, right? I could have said, met the client, discussed the small claim issue, and need to start working. And what it can do is it can do a text-to-speech button, right? Like, and you'll see now, whatever I said, right, it just recorded, right? Like, so you can do text-to-speech, right? You can do that. Now, you can use very powerful AI tools. Like, for example, I could just correct my grammar, right? Like, because I want to make sure, like, hey, my grammar is really correct, right? And you can make that the description, right? So you could use AI for summarization, and stuff like that, right? I'll show you more smart summarization. Like, let's say you put another new event, and this is your court visit, right? And let's say you had no time, you just wrote a few notes, right? You can say, met opponent, lawyer, right? Settlement conference on December 25th, 2023. Please pay balance invoice, right? Like something like that. These are your notes. You can just use AI tools and say, hey, you know what? I manage types of notes. Can you just summarize it for me? And what uLaw will do is it'll take these and say, hey, during the client meeting, I met the lawyer, the upcoming settlement conference is that, I didn't mind. You can make this the description, right? So very smart AI tools exist. You can translate that to French, right? Like, and just say, hey, that's your French equivalent of what you wanted to do. And you can make that your description. And you can say, hey, that one attending court is, maybe you want to charge a fixed rate, right? Like you can say, hey, that's a flat rate. I told you attending court is $500. Right? You could do that, right? And similarly, let's say you had a telephone conversation, right? You can just say telephone conversation. Actually, you know what? Let me make this interesting. Let's just hit the save button and let's go to our phone app. Hopefully it'll work. Let's go through that. So let's go and first find the client. Let's find the client. Oh, I think I need to log off and log back in. Let me just, okay. Definitely want to make sure I'm logging into the right. Yeah, so I'm logged in. Let me find Mr. Freddy. There he is, right? Like, see, now all the information that I basically entered there should be here. DF contractors and all that stuff. let's say we make a quick phone call to him, right? Like, I'm going to press here and say, hey, let's make a quick phone call, right? And once I make the phone call, give me a second. My phone is giving me some trouble here. Back to uLaw. Say, it immediately tells me, hey, you made a phone call. What do you want to do? I say, hey, you know what? I want to document it. You can just go here and say, hey. So now it even records like, hey, you made this phone call at 12:30. And you can say how much time it was. Let's say it was, let's say a 12-minute phone call, right? And it says telephone conversation, and you can just say apply. The minute you do that, right, if you come to the software, like you actually did that on the phone, and if you just come to the software, it'll say, hey, this telephone conversation was actually made from here. Look at that. So we can just bring things from there to here, here to there. Like that's what practice management software is all about. I'm going to make this a little larger, and I'll tell you why. Because I want to make sure that I can collect money from him from trust and general, because I want to show you the whole gamut. And as you see that you've not even raised an invoice yet, the software already starts projecting for you, balance, how much disbursement, and all that stuff. See, as you see here, the client owes you some money. So let's go ahead and do a pre-bill. Now, what's pre-bill? Pre-bill is even before you actually send an invoice to your client, you want to kind of look to see how your invoice will look like. So that's your invoice. You kind of know now, like, hey, this is what, I did. This is my disbursements. That's my retainer. And the guy owes me some money, right? So let's go ahead and now raise a real invoice. So, invoice, a complete invoice. And let's go ahead and download that invoice and actually send it to your client, right? Once you've downloaded the invoice, you've sent it to your client, what we can do is you can actually recover the money that you paid in trust account and pay yourself, right? So let me do that. So I'll click on here and it tells me, hey, the invoice is $2,111.40. $1,200 is sitting in trust account, so pay yourself. So I can click here and say, let me select these two items, right? The disbursements and my legal fee, right? Now, this is where the beauty of your software actually comes into play. So, for example, even though I selected all the amount, there's only $1,200 in trust account. You can transfer more than that, right? Like, so the software has to prevent you from transferring more. And let's say I did a bank transfer, right? Like, so I can just say electronic fund transfer, and I can give my EFT requisition number and hit the transfer button. Now the Law Society will force you to download Form 9A. So you can just download Form 9A and hit the download button, and that's your Form 9A. It's all done, right? So you just need to sign it, and you're pretty much done. So now let's go ahead and look at our presentation where they talk about client ledgers, journals, and all that stuff, right? How can you do that? So if I go back to the software, now ledgers are like statements of trust in general. As you see here, if you just download, it'll give you an entire trust ledger and a general ledger telling you how this happened. $1,200 came into the software, we raised an invoice, and then we paid ourselves $100 for the disbursements. This much is what is there, and the balance of $911,140 is still left. It can do that, right? And if you go into accounting software and you hit on the compliance button, you can download your trust receipts, general receipts, ledgers, everything in 1 second. You can just click here and hit the download button, and then your trust journals are ready. There you go. That's your trust journal for this one. Like, look at that. 1,200 came in and 1,200 was immediately withdrawn. So trust account is zero. In seconds, you can just download, your trust ledger and have all the other details. So that's what, the Law Society is expecting in terms of financial management. Okay. Let's talk about business management. Now, business management, what the Law Society is asking you to do is generally to use a software, right? The reason why they're asking you to use the software is basically for efficiency purposes, right? Like, to make yourself more efficient, right? Make sure that there's a lot of security in the software. Like, for example, the software that we have, right? If you click on this icon, it'll tell you how secure it is. The connection is secure. You need to pay attention, right? Like you don't want to be buying some random software where things are not secure, right? Like so they're asking you to make sure like things are, and then you do regular backups, right? Like and all that stuff. Like if it's mobile, they're asking even for more robust security, right? Like that's why we certify our software with iOS and Android, so that like your software is a reputed software, right? And then also have remote capability like email and voice messages. These are some of the recommendations that come on business management, right? In terms of professional management, the Law Society expects you to complete your CPD hours, constantly pay attention to case laws, new legislation, become a member of some society. Like, there's a Ontario Paralegal Association. There could be a local paralegal association. Let's say you're from Kingston, and there could be a Kingston local paralegal group. You want to be part of that, right? And constantly review your professional conducts and guidelines because they keep changing on a yearly basis. Okay. Time management is a very key, right? Like, they want to make sure that you're recording all your time dockets and even non-billables, right? Like, for example, I'll show you a quick example here, right? Like, if you add a docket here and you said like, hey, meet a client meeting and you don't want to charge him, right? You can mark it like a pro bono and say like, hey, met for clarification, but not charging, right? Like, and you can just use the AI tool and fix the grammar, right? It'll do all this stuff, and I can just apply, right? So now you basically recorded time for 12 minutes that you did some work, but you're saying it's a pro bono, right? You're not charging the client. So the Law Society wants you to make sure that you docket for non-billables as well, right? Like, and manage all your files, like, in active format. So you can move from active to close to archive, right? So they're asking you to do all that stuff, right? That's about time management. And finally, about personal management, right? Like, the legal practice is all about satisfaction for yourself, right? Like, you want, at the end of the day, you want to enjoy your area of practice, right? Like, so you want to make sure that you kind of give yourself time and, for work and personal reasons. Like, they want you to record the time you spend at work, understand your vacation, see whether you have a good work-life balance, right? Like, and they want you to focus, right? Like, on proper work-life balance and proper stress management. At the end of the day, like, your legal profession, you're all by yourself. You could be a sole practitioner. You are responsible for your proper stress management, and Law Society is kind of requesting you to do that. Now, these are like professional obligations at personal level that they're asking you to do. Okay. So what are some of the benefits of practice management software? You already saw, as you saw, like, total cost of ownership, right? Like, it's so simple, right? Like, if you are going to be doing all these things in Excel, sheets, Word documents, all that stuff, you're having so much problems, right? Right? You want to have efficiency in your practice, right? You want to practice from anywhere. You want to have Law Society compliance, right? Like, so you want to make sure, like, all these, you can see how old this presentation is, right? This was done in 2010. We're still calling ourselves the LSUC, right? But at the end of the day, those are some of the stuff that you want to take care, right? Matter management, right? We already talked about file organization. We talked about phones, meetings and dockets, disbursement management, updating the status, like, making sure that you're doing the right things at the right time, right? Then I have a demo here on how you can do a client intake. I'm going to skip that. I've already shown it to you in a piece. Matter analytics, extremely important, right? Like, big corporation, big law offices pay a lot of money to get analytics. Small companies like yours, right? We want to provide analytics and understand that, right? Like, so we have a lot of analytics built into our software, right? You can just go here and say, hey, I want like, like analytics, and we would bring you analytics and show you, how good this matter is. And I can show you right here. Let's go into the Freddie matter. Analytics is built into the software automatically for you. So let me go here and choose Freddie. Just give me a few seconds here. Let me go and pick David Freddie. That is David Freddie. And let's choose this matter, David versus Adam, right? When you choose that, analytics is right here. It tells you like, hey, how good this matter was. Like, so it'll analyze everything about this matter, and it'll start telling you like, hey, there's still invoices pending. You see that? And then it says number of invoices you've generated so far is 1. You made this much money. That was what was paid so far. That's your balance. Number of days is 0. It will give you all your aging, and it gives you so many information that you can just understand about the matter. Now, obviously, this is not a great matter to understand because everything was so simple here. But imagine complicated matters, right? Like, you give you settlement information, retainer different. It gives you so much information. Number of dockets, right? Time you spend, pro bonos. So these are all analyticals. Now, large corporations spend a lot of money to do analyticals because this is business intelligence. You need to run very complicated software to actually do all these things. You want to make sure that your software can do all these things, right? Like, so there you saw as you saw here, like, Law Society stresses that, you kind of spend time on matter analytics, okay? And the beauty of analytics is it'll answer you questions that you didn't even think about, like, hey, how much did that invoice age? Is this a good client? Let's say he comes back, you can quickly look at the analytics and decide whether he's a good client that you want to even go back to him and serve him out again, right? Like, what if he did not pay you well last time, right? You saw about calendar management. It's all about like, hey, synchronizing with your personalized calendar. Dockets are all about calendars. Only if you docket, you can make money, right? Like, so you need to make sure that you basically do a good calendar management, and your software does that, right? We also have features like forms automation. I'm going to show you that, right? Like, let's say you're working on small claims, right? Like, so in this case, I'm just going to make a simple thing. We know Roger Moore is representing Freddie, and Adam is the opponent. So we can add opponents, and we can say, so this is going to be a small claim. So, so we can add, an applicant and a defendant. So let's say we add a defendant and Adam Brown. Okay, let's say Adam Brown is his this one, and you can say, hey, Adam has a representative. Let's say I'm just going to use some funny example. Let's say, Andre Agassi is his representative. So let's say he is the opposing representative of the opponent, right? We can just say, hey, it's a very simple matter. So you can just say, David, I'm representing Adam on this side. And if you go to court forms, we do all these automation of court forms. You can do small claims, landlord and tenant, anything. Let me choose small claim for a second, right? These are all the the small claim forms. Let's say it's a simple plaintiff's claim, right? And I'm representing the plaintiff. Let's say Ottawa Courthouse, and let's put a claim number. And you put a claim number. If I put it, it will automatically download it. I hit the download button. You'll see that plaintiff claim has a lot of details to fill in. You need to know the guy's name, his address, and all the details. What the software can do is it can automate that process for you. So, for example, look at that. That's an Ontario Superior Court of Justice plaintiff claim. It filled in almost all the details for you. Ottawa. It put in the plaintiff number, the defendant details. Pretty much you just need to write this one page here. What happened, right? And you're pretty much ready to sign it off. Like, everything else is all done for you, right? Like it basically removes all the drudgery of filling court forms. Like, as you saw here, right? We fill court forms for everything. Like, offer to settle, right? Affidavit, every court form inside Ontario, like, and we go jurisdiction by jurisdiction, like, landlord and tenant board, right? POA. Like, let's say if this was a POA, all these summons are right here, right? We basically take care of every aspect of Law Society's requirement for forms. So that basically, when you automate, you save a lot of time, right? Like, and it's not just about code forms, right? We even automate AI tools, right? Like, you can click here and go to AI and say, hey, can you do all these agreements, right? Like, you can basically write a contract agreement. You can just say, download me an employment contract agreement, and you automatically do that. You can say, what's the job title, contractor, start date 12th of December 2023. probation period is 3 months, right? And you can just say standard, and you can just say standard, right? Like, what it will do is it will basically use generative AI and say, oh, if it's standard, I will look at what the industry standard is for this letter, and it just generates the letter in 2 seconds for you, rather than you actually sitting and drafting a full-fledged employment contract agreement, right? Like, so I just made this up, on this one, but as you see here, right, like, it just did an entire contract for you. All you need to do is just basically sign up. That's it, right? Like, it automatically put the start date. It did everything for you. You just need to basically pretty much sign up. So automation is very important, and these days, like, automation is done a lot, done using AIs, like, and we even go to the next step. Like, if this guy turned out to be a bad guy and you want a non-engagement, you just want to say, hey, the guy did not call me for 35 days, like, he responded to my email for 15 days, right? By LSO regulations, I need to disengage, right? Like, and just say apply and download. Now, what the software can do is, like, it will basically take standard templates, it'll look at all the stuff, and it'll generate, like, using artificial intelligence, it'll generate for you, right, a non-engagement letter that you can just send to him. And if you see here, hey, Mr. David Reddy, I hope this letter finds you well, like, blah, blah, blah. You've not engaged for a number of days of engagement is 35. I've tried so many attempts. Look at that language. It puts that language into play. And I didn't even say Law Society of Ontario. I just said LSO. And he immediately said, oh, LSO is Law Society of Ontario. It says that jurisdiction for this much say, I need to basically disengage from you. So you can use AI a lot in our software to actually do stuff, like, and get to the next level. Okay. And we have a few more minutes. Let me quickly cover some other details, and then we can get to questions. Okay. So trust accounting and accounting, it's a lot of accounting, right? Like, at the end of the day, right, like, you basically need to have very powerful analytical tools and seamless integration, right? Like, to do all these things. Like, and I'll show you our software is equipped with everything, right? Like, for example, if you go into our accounting page, right, like, whether you go it on the mobile or you go here, right, you look at your trust account balance, and you can say, hey, how's my trust account doing? Where am I doing? What's going on here, right? You can also do analytics here, right? You can just say, like, hey, how is my company actually doing? Like, for the last quarter, how much money have I made in the last 4 months? Like, what's the income summary? There's so much that you can do, in your analytics and understand your business. We even go further, like, we give you graphs, pie charts. For example, let me say I want an yearly view of my fee book by clients, right? Like, on this year, how was my year, right? And if you go, it will tell you, like, hey, this year, these many clients were in small claims. That's your percentage in real estate, immigration. Look at that. Like, small claims was my dominant, play, right? Like, I had a few clients in real estate, but mostly small claims, right? But if you see, like, there's a lot of other miscellaneous stuff. Like, POA was about 7%. You can view them as bar charts, tables. So analytics is all about, like, making your business better, right? Like, and you want your software to have that. Right? We already talked about client trust ledgers, journals, fee books. Fee books is amazing, right? Like, if you go into accounts and look at the number of reports that we can generate. We can do trial balance, revenue reports, expenses, profit and loss statements, fee books. Just click here and say, hey, can you generate me a fee book for this quarter, right? And download with analytics, right? What the Law Society is looking for here is, it's like saying, hey, how was your practice? Like, hey, Alex Bunny, that's the money you made. David Reddy, this is the money you made, right? Like, how much money was spent on small claims? What's your POA? What's your other, right? Very, very, very quickly, you can get a report that can tell you how your business was. And that's what the Law Society is actually asking you to do, so that, you can remain compliant with your practice. Come for an audit, but basically what they're checking, right? As you see in uLaw, like, everything is just a click away, right? I'm going to pause here. Let me unmute the lines. We have about 11 minutes. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead. Rick, you can take over.
All right, you guys have. So the class is saying that it's pretty straightforward. I haven't actually used uLaw for about 15 years. It's come a long way, I have to say.
Oh, thanks, Rick.
Very long way.
Yeah, we are the most compliant software across Canada, right? Like, this is our 14th year in business, right? I remember Rick speaking to you way before when we just started the company. We met, I believe we met at the Law Society, at the paralegal conference. I think I remember that, and yeah, absolutely, and yeah, like in our 14 years, like we've not failed a single audit. Like audit is very key for us. The reason why I stress on audit is basically because that's your DNA of your practice. You should not be looking at it just like, oh, the law society is after me. No, it's after you should be after yourself, right? Like that's something that you should be expecting a software to do for you, which is making sure that you have practice management ease and legal accounting all built into the same stuff, right? Like, and we make it all very easy with AI, right? Like, everywhere you go, like, we have AI now, like, you can just click here and say, I'm going to ask like, hey, can you help me with disbursements, right? And the software should be able to help you with disbursements, right? Like, here you go. These are all your disbursements videos, right? Like on stuff. So that's the beauty where we are coming to, right? We're bringing in a lot of AI. We are bringing in a lot of financial restriction. The software will not allow you to make a mistake. That's the key, right? Like it should not be like a software that allows you to make a mistake and then catch it, right? Like if you do all these things, reconciliation is a piece of cake. Like you can just go here, trust reconciliation, just fill in these important numbers, right? You put your bank statements, click your stuff that you reconcile, and just click your reconciliation button and move on, right? Like we try to make it very, 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 very simple.
Okay, it's very good.
Any other?
I like how it does the practice management and the everyday accounting. I like how it integrates. It's very simple to use too. It seems simple. It takes a little while to get used to, but it seems like it's something you can get used to quickly.
Exactly, and we have taken a few very important things, right? Like for example, like hey, you are at a doorstep and somebody came to you with a driver's license. Guess what? Like you just import the driver's license. You just say, hey, I'll show you an example. Let's just say, and that's where AI can play a lot, right? Like let's say I'm going to pick a few drivers. Let's say an Ontario driver's license. Let's say this one. This is nice. Okay, some guy called Davesh. Just say and just do upload. The AI should be able to process it, and when you apply, look at that. It filled all the details of the driver's license, including his birth date, address. Saves you a lot of time, right? Like that's what the software is all about. Using AI in the right place to help you move faster, right? Like using business intelligence, like all you saw here, like all those analytics that you saw here is all business intelligence, right? Like trying to help you, right, move in the right direction, right? Like and that's what uLaw is all about. Like trying to help you and say, hey, these are what it is, right? Like these are the insights we saw. Like helping you to say, hey, that's where I am in my business, right?
Okay, perfect. So a quick question: when the person uploads the driver's license, can we put that in the conflict? Like we could print it, correct?
Absolutely, and that's the beauty. I wish I could. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to pause my sharing. Let me see if I could. Give me 1 second here. Yeah, look at that. That driver's license that you just uploaded already comes to you. Look at that. Like it says you acquired a new client called blah blah blah, and that's your driver's license. It comes to you as an email.
Oh, perfect. That's good. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. So the software takes care of everything, and that's where we recommend strongly for people to use software, basically because it aids your practice. Now, obviously, we recommend you come to us. We are the most cost effective. Like, I think for students, it's like $34 a month. The closest competition you will see is like 150 or 180 Canadian a month, I think. But make your choice. Think about your instance, we are Canadian based, right? Like that's why we do Canadian farms, right? Like we do everything Canadian, right? And it's a lot about automation. Look at this, all these letters, right? Client intake forms, even like LSO monitoring records. You can just say and download. In 2 seconds, we will create an LSO monitoring record for you. Right? Saying, hey, this is the stuff that we were able to fill for you. Right? Look at that. And you fill in the rest. Whatever we were able to fill, we fill it out, and then you can fill the rest.
Excellent. So you've pretty much got everything covered.
I think so. Like we covered, I didn't go through everything in the software, but like you can see dashboards, like tells you pending invoices, news, matters, modified contacts, upcoming stuff. We covered a lot about contacts, right? Group them, managing them, non-engagement letters, right? There's a beautiful button called compliance on every tab. Click the compliance, it'll tell you what are the law society compliance, right? Click check, fee book, source of contacts, aging, and if you want to do branding, here's your envelopes, right? If you go to matter management, again, there's compliance there, right? You just click and say, hey, what's my compliance? It'll tell you, hey, these are your compliance, right? Client ID verification, form, maintenance letters, authorization letters, statement of activity, bill of cost. This is what you need to do. And closing letter, right? You can just say, download, boom, it's done, right? That's your closing letter, right? Like when you finally finish the client, right? Like, hey, you just write a few things and it's done. Right? Now, again, we also allow AI to be smart, right? You can go here to use AI letters and say, hey, can you write me a closing letter in English? And it'll ask you like, hey, is there anything that you want to do? And then you can put those information and it will generate you a standard closing letter, right? So as you see here, like the way we built the software is everywhere you go, you hit compliance button, and then some of them have more compliance. Like for example, there's monthly compliance, there's yearly compliance, and there's difference. Like monthly compliance is what you do, right? Or even compliance, right? Like, hey, this is what you do. Your HST, you know, your that's for Alberta, but like, you know, for year end, for you, it's all about HST report, right? You can just say, hey, I want my HST report, download. Now you can submit that to the CRA, and you're done, right? Like, you know,
excellent.
There you go. That's the HST report, right? Like it tells you like, hey, this is all the HST that you paid, this is all the HST that you collected. Boom, it's over, right? The beauty, right? Like it's not just about compliance to law society, it's about compliance to yourself. You're running a business at the end of the day, and the business is competing with large law firms, right? Like, you know, the cost of acquiring a client for you is the same as the cost of acquiring a client by a large company, and you need to be competitive, and that's where the software can make huge difference.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to discuss this with the students, and we have another couple of days, and we're going to talk about your software, and we're going to use the sample that you sent us.
Absolutely. So have fun, guys. Like, you know, if you have any questions, like, you know, reach out to us. Use all the AI tools. This beautiful button called uLaw Answers, right? You can just go there and say what you want, right? Reconciliation, and it'll immediately tell you all the reconciliation videos are here, right? Like you can just click and say, hey, I lost my reconciliation document. How do I manually generate one? How do I do trust reconciliation? What is this thing, right? Like this, and it'll tell you what are all these personal videos we have.
Or you're cutting out.
Use this button called uLaw Answers a lot, so that way, like, you know, you can answer yourself.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you very much. We enjoyed
pleasure.
Seminar.
Yeah, and thank you, Rick, for taking the time to bring your students. I will upload this video on YouTube, and you know, we can take it from there.
All right, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Bye.
Yeah.